Welcome back. Big build-up to the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Washington. That meeting with the US President scheduled in just a couple of hours from now at the White House. Before that meeting, India today is learning that the joint statement will include a specific reference to Syed Salahuddin, the chief of the Pakistan-based terror group Hizbul Mujahideen, and designate him as a global terrorist. Remember, Burhan Wani, the terror commander, was killed in an encounter last year and hailed by a martyr, none other than Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, belonged to Salahuddin's organization, and this will be seen as a huge blow to Islamabad, as terrorists operating from its territory are now being specifically named in the Indo-US joint statement, and this will hopefully choke global funds for the terrorists. Listen in to what the MEA spokesperson just said a short while ago.
It does vindicate India's longest-standing position that cross-border terrorism has been behind the disturbances created in Kashmir, and since last year, as you know. And in fact, the outfits that Syed Salahuddin leads, they have perpetuated from the territory of Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir cross-border terrorism against India, including in the state of Jammu and Kashmir for a number of years. So in that sense, I think we would welcome this notification, and it underlines also quite strongly the fact that both India and United States face threat of terrorism.
Our correspondent Padmaja Joshi joining us with the very latest. Padmaja, what more are you learning here?
In fact, just a while ago, Rajdeep, let's tell our viewers, the US State Department has declared Syed Salahuddin a global terrorist. The notification has gone up on their website. State Department terrorist designations of Mohammad Yusuf Shah, aka Syed Salahuddin. And let us quickly tell you why this has happened. Very clearly here it says Department of State has designated Syed Salahuddin as a specially designated global terrorist under Section 1B of the executive order. What does this mean? It means, Rajdeep, that there will be sanctions imposed on this person who is believed to have committed or poses a significant risk of committing acts of terrorism that threaten the security of US nationals. What is also significant, Rajdeep, is that this notification mentions Kashmir. Syed Salahuddin is the senior leader of militant group Hizbul Mujahideen. In September last year, he vowed to block any peaceful resolution of the Kashmir conflict. Very important, they say that it is he who last year said that he will block any peaceful resolution of Kashmir conflict, threatened to train more Kashmiri suicide bombers, and vowed to turn the Kashmir Valley, and it says in quotes, into a graveyard for Indian forces. Under Salahuddin's tenure as senior Hizbul leader, the HM has claimed responsibility for several attacks, including the April 2014 explosives attack in Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir, which injured 17 people. And finally, the third significant part is that it says today's action notifies the US public and international community that they will not do business, etc. And also that designations can assist here. Designations can assist or complement the law enforcement actions of other nations. So Syed Salahuddin, who has significant amount of property in Kashmir, could we soon see action against all of his properties, against all of his investments in that area as well. Major setback. Syed Salahuddin, who just today morning released a video saying that they are going to enforce a shutdown call 1 year after the encounter of his militant commander, his terror commander, Burhan Wani, is today, as of today, according to the US, designated a global terrorist. Rajdeep.
Okay, that's the big news, and it's official now, and it was broken here first by our correspondent Geeta Mohan here on India Today. Let me get in reactions to that. Raj, how do you interpret what you've just heard?
I think it's very significant, and I'm glad India Today TV broke that story, because all this while, we were concerned that Trump was only going to focus on ISIS, look at Middle East, as Ambassador K.C. Singh said earlier on this channel, Iran, and now he's finally put his sights on Pakistan, and this is the first big indication of that. And I think, given the fact, if it is true that they're going to also include it in the joint statement, it is a recognition of our concerns that is there. So what we are seeing is somewhat of a bold move by both the leaders, and President Trump has demonstrated that he can act in ways that is unpredictable, as you said, and this time certainly in our favor, and I think it's a significant development.
What will it actually mean in real terms, though? Listen to what Nawaz Sharif had said about Burhan Wani at the United Nations, and then I'll get my guest to react to that.
Our predictions have now been confirmed by events. A new generation of Kashmiris has risen spontaneously against India's illegal occupation, demanding freedom from occupation. Burhan Wani, the young leader murdered by Indian forces, has emerged as a symbol of the latest Kashmiri Intifada, a popular and peaceful freedom movement led by Kashmiris, young and old, men and women, armed only with an undying faith in the legitimacy of their cause and a hunger for freedom in their hearts.
Okay, let me get Tanvi Madan to react to that. Tanvi, you're hearing that the US statement now designating Syed Salahuddin as a terrorist, as a global terrorist. Do you believe that that will now shadow, in a sense, any progress that we might want to achieve on trade and investment? Will this be the big headline come tomorrow morning? Or what exactly will this mean? What will this actually mean, the formal designation of Syed Salahuddin as a global terrorist?
Well, as for the headlines, you guys are the ones who make the headlines, and I think this will be your headline. But I think on trade and the tougher part on trade and economic issues is you're not going to sort them out on a visit like this. So I think what you might see is a few statements, but essentially that's the kind of stuff that the bureaucrats will sort out later. I think what this means is, as Raj said, it shows that the administration is kind of focused on these groups as well, but also that they wanted to show to India that they are not ignoring this issue. I think particularly it's both the State Department and the Treasury Department who designate. It's not just a naming and shaming tool. This has financial and legal consequences for not just the group and the leader of the group, but also for anybody doing business with them. One thing I will say is I think this is also a reflection of something that we forget sometimes, which is that the Trump administration has a team that is quite familiar with Afghanistan and Pakistan and the situation there and the groups that have been active, etc. You have Secretary Mattis, NSA McMaster, Secretary Kelly at DHS, and significantly Lisa Curtis, who's senior director at the NSC, who have looked at these issues. And I think Ms. Curtis in particular has looked at this issue for a while. So I think you're seeing in this a reflection that they understand this is important for India and that they want to give something. The question is, we'll see what cooperation beyond this as well. I think that's important as well. The broader strategic cooperation, not just vis-a-vis Afghanistan and Pakistan, but China as well.
But the question is whether it will actually have any effect. In the past, for example, Sushant Sareen, India has taken up the issue of Masood Azhar. The US has taken it up, but Masood Azhar still moves relatively freely across Pakistan. The Lashkar also, despite the efforts to sort of ostracize them as a global terrorist organization, continue with their terror in the Kashmir Valley. Will this actually have any impact?
Rajdeep, I think one thing we need to take into account, Hizbul Mujahideen had been declared as another terrorist organization by the State Department more than a decade back. But the fact that at this point in time, at a time when Kashmir is once again in ferment, to name somebody like Syed Salahuddin as a globally designated terrorist, I think is very significant. I don't know if it signals some kind of a major shift in the US policy even on Kashmir, or is it simply terrorism related? But nevertheless, I think in terms of takeaways on the issue of terrorism, this is going to be a feather in the Prime Minister's cap for whatever that's worth. Now, for whatever that's worth is the important part. But I think that also we started seeing some movement. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Americans do not directly impose some kind of sanctions on the Pakistanis, but do it from the back door. For example, we've been hearing a lot about the Financial Action Task Force and how they have been tightening the screws on the Pakistanis, which is why you see Hafiz Saeed and the rest of his bunch, or at least some of his bunch, simply go back into the woodwork. You don't hear Masood Azhar anymore. So, we've seen some of that happen over the last couple of months. With Syed Salahuddin, who was actually, all out and trying to spearhead the entire terrorist movement in Kashmir, now being designated as such, and the FATF coming up for review in the next couple of days or weeks, I think it does tighten the screws on the Pakistanis. So perhaps the Americans might be acting on the Pakistanis in the first instance through the back door, and maybe this is a precursor of things to come, because after all, if they have to do something in Afghanistan, just pumping in troops into Afghanistan is not going to change the game, and not when 30,000 troops could not change it, and more than 100,000 troops total could not change it. Another 10,000 troops is not going to make much of a difference in Afghanistan. So for the Americans, I think it is important that they start turning the screws, and this is what exactly was the material in the report which was written by both Ambassador Hussein Haqqani and Lisa Curtis not so long back, before I think around the time the Trump administration came into office. So I think some of it we are seeing play out in terms of this nomination of Syed Salahuddin. So I think it's a good thing which has happened, and I'm not entirely I'm not pessimistic at all that this will lead to something, but whether it leads to something in the very immediate future or it takes a few months remains to be seen.
First reactions, KC Singh.
Well, I think, as Americans realize, you have seen the sequencing of the meetings, the two secretaries coming and calling on the PM. They would have come in to assess what exactly the Prime Minister was looking forward to, and they would have conveyed it to President Trump, and they would have also conveyed if there were any wrinkles to be ironed out when the joint statements were being worked out. And this whole Salahuddin thing would have been, I'm sure, mentioned at that stage, and that is why after the secretary went back, they issued the notification. But normally with America, you have to be careful. They're giving you a takeaway, they're giving you a great something to crow about, but at the same time, they would also then be countervailing pressure. They would also extract something from you, and that would be probably some undertaking on what you plan to do with a dialogue with Pakistan, normalizing the valley. Normally, they would work both ways. I can't imagine that they'll have a one-sided handout and not bring any pressure on India. That we will know eventually. But at the moment, of course, it gives India something to talk about.
Gives us a talking point, but I think KC Singh makes a valuable point that there are no free lunches with the Americans, and particularly if you're dealing with someone like Trump, it really, you're dealing with someone who will want a deal. So what else would America expect then from India in return for designating Salahuddin and as a global terrorist?
I think Ambassador Singh is right. President Trump is highly transactional, and I think what you would see in the joint statement is some concession India is making, either on the defense sector, which is what the American eye has been there, and we've seen recent announcements by Tata and Lockheed on a partnership. If for instance that goes through, that actually is quite significant if India is able to pull that off, and so as Trump agrees, because that's actually goes against his America first. But in some senses, if there's an agreement that we'll just do the integration, American jobs continue, you could see that. And I think there are plenty of other areas that they could look at in trade itself, where of course there have been nagging problems, but you've had deals on renewable energy, natural gas. There have been, issues of textiles that we were looking for it, healthcare, pharmaceuticals. There's huge amounts of other areas. So I suspect in the joint statement, after all, it's going to be on three pillars that is there. On terror, we're seeing the indications of that, and we might see some concession on that front. But certainly, President Trump recognizing one of our key concerns. On defense, I think we will make some concession. Maybe there's a lot of helicopters to be bought, and we might see some talk of developing on that front. There's also the fighter planes that we talked about, 120 planes costing a huge amount of money, several thousands of crores, 50 to 60,000 crores. That's a big deal that they're eyeing for. And on trade, there are critical areas that India still requires, whether it's transfer of technology, high technology, or on various concessions being made. India will look forward, and possibly America is looking forward for India to make this concession. So I think you will see some give and take in this opportunistic alliance that Trump particularly likes.
Transactional is the word that Raj used. Do you agree with that, Tanvi Madan, that this will, in a sense, the nature of any joint statement involves an element of a transactional relationship? It's not just strategic. So India will also have to make a few concessions?
I think, I think Raj is absolutely right. The key term here is give and take. And you've heard over and over again, I think you'll see it more later today, is the term mutually beneficial. To Ambassador Singh's point that the Americans are transactional, so are Indians. The idea, each side has said we don't want a transactional relationship, but over the many years have then turned around and said, what have you done for me lately? So I think the key is to get for both sides to feel like they're getting something out of it, because sounds that you're not going to have a sustainable relationship over time. So I agree with Raj. I think you will see something. You're not necessarily going to see something that the Americans want or expect in exchange for this necessarily in the India-Pakistan context. What you might see it is in terms of counter ISIS, in terms of more intelligence sharing, or perhaps in Afghanistan, in terms of doing more in supply of military equipment or more training or more kind of capacity building efforts. So I think it's a kind of a more global picture in terms of the chessboard, in terms of what you can give, what you can take. I'm mixing metaphors there, of course, but it's much more global. It's not necessarily in the same bilateral dynamic. So I think I absolutely agree with Raj that there's going to be something on both sides. Yes, both sides have to compromise on some things, but I think both will also have their fallback positions, that there are going to be certain things they're not going to budge from. For example, in India's case, sending troops to Afghanistan, I think there are people who understand that that might and is a bridge too far. So I think, yes, the question is, what do the two sides want? And these joint statements are worked on for, as Ambassador Singh would note and tell you, he'd known better than I would, that they worked on for days, if not weeks, in previous administrations. So I think we will see some transactions, but that's actually what keeps relationships sustainable, so that both sides feel they're getting something out of it.
What more can India get out of this meeting beyond what we just heard, Ambassador Singh? Is there anything specific that you're looking at?
I think I'm looking at, I think it's become a cliche for all of us who've been saying it, but I think in terms of what India can get out of it I think it's underlying all of this is like a personal relationship. It doesn't have to necessarily be a chemistry, but a relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. I think in more specific terms, I think, things like this drone deal, which everybody is talking about, if it goes through, it's not a deal yet, but what it is something India has been asking for a while, perhaps not as much as India wanted, which is approval for the sale of US drones to India. So I think that would be, we haven't heard notification yet. It has to be notified to the US Congress. But that is something, India could get out of it. I think more than that, we talked about earlier, I think Ambassador Singh was absolutely right. This is about, in terms of what India can get out of it, this is about Prime Minister Modi ascertaining Trump's views and strategic vision and what and his approach. But I think this is also an opportunity for Prime Minister Modi to shape those views. We've seen this with a number of leaders. We saw this with Prime Minister Abe of Japan. We saw this with Chinese President Xi. Trump, it does kind of take on some of the arguments that leaders have made. He sometimes doesn't know about particular issues, and therefore he will listen and take on kind of the views of the people he meets, especially if he respects them.
Ambassador Singh, that same question to you. What more can we expect?
No, basically that. But if you notice what the spokesman of the ministry was saying, the two secretaries, when they called on Prime Minister, were talking of continuity. So I think that is an essential thing. They realize that India is worried on that count. That is this a break from the momentum of the previous two administrations? They are assuring us that no, we're picking up those themes. And then, of course, Tanvi is absolutely correct. It's how you now fill in the details, because Trump really is not a man who goes into details, and he's therefore, to that extent, open to suggestion. If his core beliefs are not challenged. I don't think his core beliefs are challenged on geopolitics. His core beliefs are all US-based, US-driven concepts. So on those, if you can shape his thinking, then that's an opportunity. And that is what the joint statement will show.
In a sense, therefore, we've sort of perhaps got at least part of what we wanted. That we see a US president, and Mr. Trump has indicated this before, that he'd be tough on terror. So in a sense, it's not unexpected to have this kind of statement coming in on Syed Salahuddin. My worry, of course, is that there is the question that affects perhaps even more people, which is trade and investment. Is there, Raj, your sense that this American administration will budge from the Make in America rhetoric, the America First rhetoric, and will that in some way cloud the relationship? Is that the ticklish area? Should Prime Minister Modi, as we are being told he just might, actually take up H-1B visas with the Americans aggressively in this first visit itself?
You know, it's a very good point, Rajdeep. And so far, I wouldn't classify it, but we were looking at it, I would just turn the phrase around, an America First relationship, till President Trump was there. In the last decade, we've really built relations with America. It was our prime sort of diplomatic initiative. We've seen the nuclear deal come through strategic partnership. And with President Trump coming, there was a sense that there is going to be a break in continuity. And therefore, what Ambassador Casey Singh saying, the re-emphasis by the two secretaries saying that, look, we believe in that, is reassuring. But it also gave India an opportunity to look beyond America. It also gave India space to develop relations with others. You know, if you see Prime Minister Modi's trips before this, going to Germany, going to Russia, building relations with Japan, Australia, for instance, these are countries that are feeling somewhat disjointed by the way President Trump is going. And look at the way he's handled China. We thought we would be the, we could continue to be the counterbalancing force that America wanted for China. He's discarded that. So in some senses, we began, I think Prime Minister Modi, when he set out on this, was also clear that India would start building space outside, and climate change was a setback. Because after all, America had to promise a lot. Clean technology was something America had to give. Solar technology cheaply was something America had to give for us to fulfill it. And of course, natural gas is the other component that America has promised us. But actually, if we look at it, I don't think Prime Minister Modi is going to raise the climate change issue as much as say, look, there were certain commitments on that. I hope you're not going to back off of that. If you look at it, Prime Minister Modi is looking a bit like an angel on climate change. We were the problem. Yes. And now President Trump is the problem. So actually, if you see, this gives us an opportunity. And there are areas that we could look forward to. There are ticklish areas on IPR issues, for instance, apart from climate change. They have great problems with our intellectual property rights, our pharmaceutical industries. But I think you've got on defense a very, very strong relationship. They're recognized as a major defense partner. So what I think you will get is on trade, you will certainly see good areas coming in on, as I had mentioned earlier, on a few of those critical zones, pharmaceuticals, textiles, clean energy. And I think you will see something on the defense front, some movement on that front. Okay,
let's leave you there though, Raj, because the images as typically on TV we are showing is of Salahuddin, because he perhaps makes the bigger headline at the moment, and certainly that's the talking point for now. But obviously issues of trade and investments will crop up, and climate change in that wide-ranging one-on-one that we expect between the two prime ministers. Thank you all very much to my guests for joining me till late this evening. I'll be back in half an hour at midnight as we build up with more on that meeting. I want to leave you with that cartoon that should strike you as interesting, because these are two formidable leaders, personalities who are known to have a mind of their own. Will it be a case of my friend Narendra meeting my friend Donald? They have lots in common, from tweeting to being tough on terror. Let's leave it there and be back with more at the midnight hour.